Just a heads up that today's episode contains distressing themes, including child sexual abuse. Listener discretion is advised. This week, the New South Wales Government introduced legislation to remove the use of good character references during criminal sentencing. If passed, it would make New South Wales the first state in Australia to do so. In today's podcast, Achol will walk us through the years-long campaigning that's led to this reform that advocates are calling one of the most monumental shifts in how the courts approach sentencing. Achol, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Billi.
So you have been covering this topic for TDA and you've been talking to victim survivors, you've spoken to the government, the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into that, I think we just need to set the scene. What exactly are good character references?
So in the context of New South Wales courts, convicted offenders are allowed to present good character references, which then the judge will go away and consider when deciding the final sentence.
And so what exactly are those good character references? Like, what actually are we talking about?
So when we do talk about good character references, we're talking about things like an offender's reputation, their criminal history, or rather their lack of a criminal history. But it can also mean things like previous awards if they've, received them that demonstrate a significant contribution to society.
And in practice, that means that the judge might reduce a perpetrator's sentence because of this previous supposed good character evidence.
Exactly. So, it might be typical for a judge to sentence someone to 5 years for a certain crime, and because of this evidence, it could be reduced to, 4.5 years.
And we're talking here about all criminal cases, not just sexual assault cases.
That's right. But in 2008, there was an exception that was introduced. And basically what that meant was that good character references couldn't be used in child sexual abuse cases. And to clarify, that means victims who are under the age of 16. But that was the only exception. So today it's still used in sexual abuse cases for victims who are over the age of 16.
And we now have this new reform. How did the idea for this reform come about?
So it's actually been in the works for quite a while now. In 2024, the government did commission a review into its practice and ultimately came to the conclusion that it should be scrapped. That was one of the key recommendations that the review made. And what's been really pivotal about this review is that the experiences of victim survivors basically informed that review.
And I know you spoke to some of those victim survivors who have literally sat in courts whilst their perpetrators who have been found guilty had people come in to talk about, their supposed good character prior to them committing this crime.
Hello, my name's Sam. I'm the co-founder of TDA. I'm just popping in to interrupt this video to ask if you could do one thing for me, and that is press subscribe on this YouTube channel. It's the best way to show us that you love what we do and that you're here for our future. And now, back to the deep dive.
That's exactly right. So I spoke to a young man called Harrison James, who is the co-founder of the Your Reference Ain't Relevant campaign, which has been one of the leading voices for the cause. He began the movement back in 2022 and, his motivations were driven by his own personal lived experience of child sexual abuse. Now, here's a little bit about his story, and just a warning that this next section does contain distressing details.
I was sexually abused by my stepmother from the ages of 13 to 16, and she fell pregnant to my daughter. My perpetrator was able to get in contact with me not because she was this evil monster, but because she had this good character. And she cultivated this relationship of trust with my own mother and, my grandmother and people who thought that I was safe in her care.
And when I was talking to Harrison, he was telling me all these details about how his trauma was only compounded by his experiences trying to seek justice.
To have to sit there and hear that the person who perpetrated that crime upon you as this great person is absolutely devastating. If you sexually abuse a child, you are not of good character. And if you are violent towards your partner, you are not of good character.
Hearing Harrison talk about that, you can really just only imagine how deeply distressing that would be.
That's right. And what's interesting about his story is that when he sought out to begin the campaign, it only focused on erasing good character evidence in child abuse cases. And under the proposed laws, as we've, mentioned at the start of the podcast, it will now apply to every kind of criminal case. And that's what he calls a dream come true for his advocacy journey.
This reform is about restoring confidence in a system that too often feels overwhelming and unreachable for survivors and victims of crime. I hope that this reform sends the opposite message. I hope this change gives survivors the confidence to come forward, knowing the courts will focus on what happened to them, not who their offender knows or how they're perceived in society. I pursued this reform for the little me who experienced that, and for every child who might otherwise have to sit in a courtroom and hear how great their perpetrator was. We wanted to ensure that what happened to us doesn't happen to the next kid.
So the New South Wales government has introduced the bill, but it still needs to pass Parliament. So that's the next step. Do we know if it will pass Parliament?
At this stage, it's really hard to tell. You can never put a fixed date on how, legislations move through the houses. As you mentioned, it's been introduced in the lower house. So at the moment, it'll need to go through its votes. It'll be debated. It'll be, amended. And then it'll go to the upper house where the same processes will take place. And then we will find out the outcome.
And do we know if the opposition will support it?
So at the moment, not yet. I did reach out to the opposition and they have declined to comment, basically on the basis that they haven't had the time to review the legislation.
Achol, thank you for taking us through that, and thank you for coming back into the pod chair.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if this story has brought up any issues for you, you can call 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732. We'll be back this afternoon with your evening headlines, but until then, we hope you have a great day.